See, there were people here I went to high school with.
You did? Excellent. I love it. Hello, everyone. So excited to have you back for our second Goodfellows lecture. We're really excited to have Evan Weiner here, who I understand already is a high school friend of
Well, we knew I knew Elliot. I didn't know David, but I knew Elliot.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we have more coming in. Throughout Evan's presentation, I'm going to let him kind of go over his resume of, in sports and journalism and all the stuff that he's done. I do want to point out that I am going to be handing out to you the Arts, Books, and Culture program brochure. Just 1 minute of a programming note. Don't trip over that there. There are so many things in here, including a veterans program. We're having an opening of a new art gallery. There are other lectures that are going to be going on, all centered around the arts, the Philharmonic. So I just want you to take note of this. So that I don't have you looking at it while Evan's speaking, I'm going to leave it by the back door over here. Those are my previous teaching days. Hi Jay, welcome. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Evan. You okay with the lights off?
I'm good. It's up to them. It doesn't matter to me.
Do you need the lights off or
They might want to let it off, take it off, so. But to me, I don't care.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, and my name is Evan Weiner, and I did go to Spring Valley High School, and I'm long gone from the county, 44 years removed from Rockland County. My career is pretty simple. I started in Rockland County. I was in 11th grade at Spring Valley High School. Had a teacher by the name of Joe Dionisio, my English teacher. He always was like this, and he would always say, student, student, student. And I met up with him about 4 years ago, and he was the same thing. Hi, student. And he said, you have a good voice. How would you like to be on radio? I said, in the worst way. And I was. We did a show on WRKL radio called Tiger Talk. It was a terrible show, but that was my beginning. I also worked for the Nyack Journal News and the Bergen Record. I went on to work for WGRC, which was in Nanuet for a while, WNEW, and then I got to Manhattan, and the rest is history. I've been on TV with Sam Donaldson's show. Most of my career has been in radio, a lot in newspapers. I've covered sports, I've covered sports business, I've covered politics. In fact, in 1980, I had to go up to Bear Mountain. A January night, Ronald Reagan was having a campaign rally. He hadn't caught fire yet. It's January. It's a night. It's in Bear Mountain. How cold was it? 6 people showed up for the whole rally, but I did that story for WNEW radio. I was on WNEW doing news starting at the age of 21.
What year was that?
1980, January of 1980, right before he caught fire. Sports, media, and money. And I'm going to start with, how many of you know the story of Casey at the Bat? Okay, there's no joy in Muntville tonight for the mighty Casey struck out. So I'm going to ask the chicken and egg story. Was it newspapers, through poems like Casey at the Bat that made sports popular, or did sports sell newspapers? In the 1890s, during the journalism wars in New York City, they added sports, and all of a sudden, people became very, very interested in the New York Giants, among other teams that were around back in those days. There was obviously, there was no Knicks, no Rangers, no New York Giants football team, but there was baseball, and baseball sold. Sports, media, and money, and that is David Stern. That's one of the books I wrote about David Stern, the Stern years in the NBA. And David taught me a lot about the business of sports, and the business of sports, which has changed a little bit during his day, between 1984 and 2014. The way it was arranged was that you needed to have government support to build your buildings, you needed corporate support to buy the tickets, and you needed a big cable TV deal. That has changed because of the cord cutters. But there is still money in cable TV. So that is the three-legged stool, and you need all 3 legs to survive as a major league franchise today. But where did this all start from? Where did the money come from? Well, it came because of this guy, David Sarnoff, who was the founder of NBC Radio and also the founder of NBC TV, and can be argued as the guy who made the American Football League and forced the NFL-AFL merger. Any Jets fans here? You have my sincere condolences. Your owner leaves a lot to be desired, but I could tell you stories about him, but we're not
It
here.
goes way back before that.
Oh, with Leon? Leon liked clean bathrooms.
Well,
Leon Hess.
yeah, Don Cricket told an interesting story. He said during the coin flip,
Yeah.
he said the Jets won, and the referee said, this goal. And the guy said,
Yeah.
I'll keep the money. I'll keep the coin.
That sounds like Don Maynard.
No, well, it's Don Cricket announcing it.
Yeah, that sounds like Don Maynard. Anyway, this is David Sarnoff, and he had it all figured out. By the way, David Sarnoff became of age during the sinking of the Titanic. He was a telegraph operator at the Wanamaker's department store in New York. He goes out to Coney Island. There was Marconi Station out there, and he gets the list of the survivors of the Titanic and sends it to the families. And at that point, he begins to realize, hey, if I can get a piece of the frequencies, I can make a lot of money in radio, and eventually he would. So he forms NBC in 1926, but he's working for RCA back in 1921, and he had it all figured out. RCA had to sell radios, and to sell radios, you needed programming. Music, news, and sports. How many of you remember, well, you don't remember, how many of you have heard of Jack Dempsey? Okay, heavyweight champion of the world. And he was sort of a Muhammad Ali character in his day because he was accused of being a draft dodger. He did not serve during World War I, and the thing about him, he said, well, I am the sole breadwinner for the family. So half the people coming to see the Jack Dempsey fights initially wanted to see his head knocked off. The other half came to watch him and hope he wins. Anyway, so it's July 22nd, 1921, and David Sarnoff arranged the broadcast of the Jack Dempsey Georges Carpentier prize fight Carpentier from France. Within 3 years, the big news of that day wasn't that Dempsey knocked out Carpentier in 4 rounds. The big news of the day was that radios sold. All of a sudden, radios were selling because of one reason. They wanted to hear the Jack Dempsey fight. It was called the Radiola, and the price was hefty. It was $75 in those days, which is about $4,000 today. And it was a success. Within 3 years, $83 million worth of units were sold, which would be $1.4 billion today. Sports sold on radio, and here is the big fight. It was at Boyle's 30 Acres in Jersey City, New Jersey. It was a temporary place. It was the first $1 million gate in boxing history. 91,000 people were there. And the radio pioneer, RCA, arranged for the live coverage of the match via KDKA in Pittsburgh, George Westinghouse Laboratories. It was the first national broadcast, and you could say it was the first international broadcast, because KDKA went into Canada, went as far as the Rocky Mountains, went down to Mexico, and east to Bermuda. So it was an international broadcast. People bought radios because of it. And there is Dempsey, who fought Carpentier. The big news, radios sold. The first boxing match on radio featured this guy. He looks real tough, doesn't he? His name is Johnny Ray. And no, he didn't, but he might have sung Cry after the fight because he didn't win the fight. So anyway, it was April 1st, 1921, the first broadcast of a sporting event. 10-round, no decision fight between Johnny Ray and Johnny Dundee in Pittsburgh's Motor Square Garden, and it was on KDKA. Guys on radio used to dress like that. Why? Why? Who's going to see them? Who's going to see them unless you imagine them? That's Harold Arlen, and Harold Arlen's grandson, Steve Arlen, pitched for the San Diego Padres in 1969. Harold Arlen was an early broadcaster in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He called the first baseball game and the first football game on radio in 1921. It's August 5th, 1921, and Arlen is there. The game is between the Philadelphia Phillies and the Pittsburgh Pirates. Sports, particularly boxing and baseball, helped fuel radio's rise. 1921 World Series, 2 stations did that, KDKA and WJZ. What do you think JZ stood for?
Jersey City.
Jersey, New Jersey. And it was in Newark, actually, the station. And it broadcast the World Series for the first time on radio. Grantland Rice and Tommy Cowan were given the calls, but the broadcasters weren't at the game. Now you got broadcasters not going on road trips to save money, and they call the games off TV. So what's new is old again. 104 years ago, these guys were not there. They were actually at the station studios and read a play-by-play account from the telegraph wire, which gets me into my story of interviewing Ronald Reagan up in Bear Mountain in January of 1980. So we're sitting around and there's nobody there, so he gives me a lot of time. So I said to him, didn't you recreate Chicago Cubs games on WHO in Des Moines, Iowa? And he said, yeah. I said, so what was it like to recreate a game? He said, you needed to lie a lot.
That's right.
Because they would just come in, fly ball to left field. So he said you had to describe what was going on, even though you had no idea what was going on. That pitch is outside for a ball. You had no idea what the count was or anything else. That's how you used to recreate baseball
The
games.
Giants moved to San Francisco.
And Les Kiter.
Les Kiter.
Les Kiter.
Yeah.
Les Kiter recreated
What about
games.
when the tape stopped? I remember once when the tape stopped, he had to make something up. So
Yeah.
he said the umpire went out because somebody
Yeah.
was shining a mirror in center field.
Yeah.
Nobody was doing that, but he had to wait for the tape.
Yeah, well, that's what Reagan did in 1938 at WHO in Des Moines. The first football game, October 21st, and that was University of Pittsburgh beating West Virginia. NBC broke onto the scene in a big way in 1927. Again, Sarnoff knows that you need content on radio to sell radiolas, and he gets the Rose Bowl football contest, the first coast-to-coast radio game. So this is how people used to follow baseball. For the best reports of the World Series, read the Washington Post. And other cities, New York and other places, would set up a diamond like that, and they would recreate the game for you that way. And you would go in front. How would you like to watch the baseball game in front of a building like that?
Great.
But that's how they did it. That's exactly how they did it. In the 19th century, media played a critical role in making sport both an acceptable social institution and a popular commercial one. Through their coverage and promotional efforts, newspaper sports journalists helped to standardize the rules of horse racing, baseball, and college football. Henry Chadwick was the guy who did baseball back in 1840. And if you're really looking for the father of baseball, it's not Abner Doubleday, because he never saw a baseball game. It was Henry Chadwick back in 1840. In the 1800s, newspapers often sponsored billboards outside their offices that displayed box scores of baseball games, scores which they received over new instantaneous forms of communications like the telegraph and the telephone. The 1923 World Series. Why did Sarnoff buy the 1923 World Series between the Yankees and the Giants?
Because of Babe Ruth.
Because of the Babe. Because of the Babe. KDKA WJZ of Newark, they were the first broadcasters of the World Series on radio. They were not present at the games. In 1922, WJZ broadcast the entire World Series, and there's the drawing card on your left, Babe Ruth. Meanwhile, in Cincinnati, it's kind of interesting. Now, WLW, which I did some work for, what was called stringing on the Bob Trumpy show with Chris Collinsworth back about 35 years ago. Cincinnati, Pal Crosley. I don't know how many of you had parents that had the big Crosley radios. You had the big Crosley radio in your house?
Yeah.
Well, the big Crosley radios. He was basically a guy who was just trying to sell radios. He also had the broadcast rights to Cincinnati Reds games. He was a manufacturer of radios and decided to expand into broadcasting as a way to encourage his consumers in Cincinnati to purchase more radios in 1921, and that is the Crosley Playboy radio. In February 1934, he reluctantly buys the Cincinnati Reds professional baseball team. He also approved baseball's first regularly scheduled play-by-play broadcast of all scheduled games on his local station, which then was WSIAI, whose call letters stood for Sports and Information. And what he figured he was going to do, sell more radios, because people who were, this is during the Depression, he'll be able to sell more radios. People might not be able to afford going to Cincinnati Reds games, but he can make up the money on advertising. So he decides he's going to invest in the Cincinnati Reds. Larry McPhail took over the Cincinnati Reds in 1933. His son Lee was the American League president, also the New York Yankees general manager, and used to take me out bribing me for lunch when he was the American League president. Anyway, he sold the controlling interest of the club to Pal Crosley, the owner of 2 Cincinnati radio stations, a match made in economic heaven. McPhail knew that broadcasting games would promote the team, and Crosley could now have better ratings because he has Cincinnati Reds baseball. G.A. Richards was not a good guy. Let me give you some backgrounds on him. He was a radio pioneer. He owned WJR in Detroit, WGAR in Cleveland. I don't know how many of you have heard the name Father Coughlin? You've heard of Father.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody else hear the name Father Coughlin?
Yeah, he was.
Well, he was an anti-Semitic Catholic priest based in the Detroit area during the time of Hank Greenberg. Greenberg had to put up with Henry Ford and Father Coughlin when he was out there. And he put Father Coughlin on the air, and he fought to keep Father Coughlin on the air, even though every week there was some anti-Semitic smear. And he also was a proponent of the protocol of the Jewish elders and all that. And he believed that the world was controlled by Jews. So this guy defended him. But this guy also made money for the National Football League. 1934, WJR radio station owner G.A. Dick Richards purchased these Portsmouth, Ohio Spartans and moved them to Detroit and renamed them the Lions. Richards convinced the NFL to allow the Lions and the defending world champion Chicago Bears to play for the Western Division Championship on Thanksgiving. But it was more than just, hey, let's have a game on Thanksgiving. This is when the tradition of Detroit hosting these Thanksgiving games really starts. He convinced NBC that they should broadcast the game on radio all across the United States and charge NBC money so the league could make money. The game ended up being a huge success, being played at the University of Detroit Stadium in front of a sold-out crowd of 26,000 fans and broadcast across the nation over 94 different radio stations. What the sports owners found out was if you put the games on radio, people are still going to go to the games, and you can make some money off of it. And this is where it starts for the NFL. And cereal, Volume 1, Wheaties. How many of you ate your Wheaties this morning? The All-American boy, Jack Armstrong. Wheaties started its long relationship sponsoring baseball in 1933. 1946, Gillette signed a 10-year, $14 million deal for exclusive radio sponsorship of the World Series and All-Star games. The money becomes flowing in. By the way, how many of you remember Bob Wolf, who did Knicks games and Ranger games?
Very good.
And he lived down in
Yeah.
South Nyack.
Yeah.
He was in South Nyack. And when I was doing that stupid show, Tiger Talk, on WRKL radio, which was the world's worst radio show, Bob befriended me. I was 15. We had a lifetime friendship because of that silly little radio show I did on WRKL radio. And I was friends with his son Rick, who recently passed away. And Bob used to give me tips and used to encourage me and all that other stuff. And because of that silly radio show. But Bob did Don Larson's Perfect Game on TV in 1956 when he threw and I don't know how many of you remember that Perfect Game. You do,
Yeah.
you do. Do you know Sam Huff had tickets for that game and didn't go? He was too sore from the game before when the Giants played the Chicago Cardinals, stayed in his room, and he told me one day, he said, I had tickets to that game. I never went. So Bob did that game and also did the greatest game ever in the NFL, supposedly the Giants and Colts game for the 1958 championship. And I said, how'd you get those gigs? He said, the guy at Gillette knew me. He said, you want to do the games? That was that.
It was
So
on
he-
radio in New York.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, it's on
black
TV. It was not on TV though. Baseball teams that share the city with another team were fighting to prevent road games from being broadcast while one team was on the road. And of course, there were 3 teams in New York at that time. If the fans could hear a game on radio, they were less likely to attend the game in person. Judge Landis, another peach, the baseball commissioner, there he is. In 1935, he signs a deal that allowed the World Series to be broadcast on the radio on all 3 major networks in those days. That would be NBC Red, CBS, and the Mutual Broadcasting System. In exchange, they got $400,000, which probably today would translate to about $7-8 million. Maybe, no, actually, it would be the 21. Be about $20 million today. $20 million. Stations decided that they could send employees to the game and report on live action, which is what happened to me eventually. Owners wanted the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, to revoke licenses on the grounds that broadcasts lacked club consent. It would go to court. 1939, now you never even thought of this, that you got court cases over radio, right? And money. Radio and money. Key court case, the Pittsburgh Athletic Club, the Pittsburgh Pirates versus KQV radio. They just went off the air, KQV. They were in Pittsburgh, an all-news radio station. Decided that baseball broadcasts were private property and could be sold to the networks. Sarnoff again, and there is David Sarnoff, and you'll notice he keeps repeating here. The first televised baseball game was May 17, 1939. Game between Princeton and Columbia. Any Ivy League grads here? Nope. Okay. There were only a few TV sets available in New York City, maybe about 400. The first network sports broadcast was NBC's Gillette Cavalcade of Sports. After all, they had the perfect audience. All men were going to shave in those days, except for the few who had mustaches and beards. And that premiered in 1944. Willie Pep, by the way, I met Willie Pep in the mid-1980s. And you want to talk about a guy who was punch drunk. Willie Pep was that. I don't even know if he knew his name. Anyway, against Chalky White, featherweight championship bout. Now, sell TVs. You sold the radios, sell TVs. Thousands will see the World Series by Philco Television. Immediate delivery. See your Philco dealer for a free demonstration. They look like furniture pieces. And this is, I'll read this to you right here. Yes, the Yankees and Dodgers will play the 1947 World Series to the biggest audience in history. How many of you remember your first TV? Anybody? What kind of
What was
TV?
the size?
That was the size. You looked in like that.
Emerson 6-inch.
Emerson 6 and 1. That's not too. That's not too much different than what you look at today on streaming. Not too much. That we've gone back to the future. Anyway, so buy your Philco and watch the World Series and watch the Yankees beat the Dodgers. Any old Brooklyn Dodger fans here? You were. Wait until next year. And it finally came. And then 2 years later, they're gone. They're gone. The first network telecast of the World Series did not take place until 1947, when NBC broadcast over a 4-station network, which was like New York, Washington, maybe Chicago, maybe Boston. In fact, Boston didn't have TV until the next year. In fact, in Boston, in the Boston Commons, to sell TV in 1948, they put up 100 TVs in the Boston Commons so people could watch the Boston Braves, Cleveland Indians World Series and hopefully buy a TV.
Network baseball arrived in 1948-49, and the first network football game, another college football game, televised in 1950. Anybody remember watching TV like that in front of a store? You did?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you hear the sound though?
No.
No, they never put the sound on. They wanted you to buy the TV, and if they got you inside, maybe they could sell it. But people used to sit there, and judging from this picture, it looks like it's the fall, and it looks like it's either the World Series or a college football game, and that woman behind there doesn't care. Doesn't care at all. The 1947 World Series stands as the beginning of a modern era of competitive television as the first televised series, and it ran on a bunch of NBC and CBS stations, and the broadcasts were popular. People who did not own television sets stood outside windows of TV stores to watch it, because you can't follow a baseball game without the sound if you're watching on TV, and that's what they did. Here's an Admiral TV, $379.95, which today would be somewhere around $5,000 to buy the TV. This is a very interesting story. Let me ask you, in the 1960s, anybody's parents go up to Connecticut to watch Channel 3, to watch New York Giants games?
Yeah.
I did.
You went up there. You went to the Hi-Ho Hotel
No, I had friends living in Connecticut.
in Connecticut. Anybody else who went up there? You went
Yeah.
up there?
Just outside the Yale Stadium.
You went to watch TV. And you went to New Haven to watch Channel 3.
Stanford.
You went to
There's
Stanford.
a 50-mile radius.
Yeah, Stanford would just about get Channel 3. Just about get Channel 3. WTIC. They used to make a lot of money for those hotel owners, those 6 games. Because people would go up there on Saturday night, rent the room, have dinner, party, whatever they're doing, and they had to rent the room for Sunday as well. They just couldn't leave at 12 o'clock. They wanted to watch a football game. So they made a lot of money on those weekends. Anyway, this is how it came about and how that little cottage industry came about. The Los Angeles Rams owner Daniel Reeves decides to put home and road games on local TV. The makers of the Admiral TV, anybody own an Admiral TV back in the day, if you remember? You might not remember. Anyway, decided to sponsor Rams home games and road games in 1950. Reeves got Admiral to underwrite any of his financial losses if home game attendance fell. This was a bad decision by Admiral. 1949, Reeves got 49,854 people per game into the LA Coliseum for the 6 games. 1950, home attendance was 26,804 people per game. So Admiral had to give Reeves $307,000, which today would be roughly $4 or $5 million, to make up in attendance. The 1950 Western Conference playoff games, it's blacked out in LA. That game drew 85,501 people to the Coliseum. You know, the NFL back in those days, that was a mom and pop store. George Halas, after the season, would shut down, and you'd have to see him at the Halas and May Sporting Goods Company in the Loop in Chicago if you wanted to see him. Tim Mara and Jack Mara had other things to do. Nobody was a full-time football owner at that time. The players had to have off-season jobs. The coaches had to have off-season jobs. It was a step above semi-pro football. Following the 1950 season, the NFL Commissioner Burt Bell told NFL owners, you cannot broadcast games in your home market. 6-game attendance rebounded for the Rams to 43,801 people per game for the within the 75-mile radius where it was blacked out. The Justice Department sues the NFL. And in 1953, the Philadelphia judge, Alan K. Grimm, ruled that teams could black out games within a 75-mile radius of the home stadium, and that would be the rule until 1973. I doubt too many people here remember the Dumont TV network.
Yes.
How many?
Right.
Channel 5, WABD.
To remember the Dumont Network, you have to be a minimum of about 80 years old. 80 years old. Because it went off the air on September 23rd, 1955. But their sports contracts ended up elsewhere. In the 1950s, in the early days of TV, the big sports were roller derby.
Yes.
Remember the roller derby?
Absolutely.
Bowling. Remember bowling? Wrestling or wrestling.
Yeah.
Boxing, baseball, and football. Now, in 1950, the three most popular sports in America were baseball, horse racing, and boxing. Within 15 years, football would be at the top. Within 15 years, it's all because of TV. 1950, baseball, the undisputed king of sports in the United States. By 1965, according to the Harris poll, football becomes the #1 sport in the United States. There's my old buddy Yogi. I used to speak at Yogi's museum. Anybody go to Yogi's museum? It's worth the trip.
We have a trip scheduled for December 3rd.
Yeah. it's
Okay, I'm
worth-
going to talk to you about that.
Yeah, it's worth the trip.
Thanks for plugging.
You won't see me there because I
I
haven't
have that
spoken.
card.
You have that? That's worth money.
Good.
That card's worth money. But notice it's the Bowman card that says color TV. Oh, by the way, when Yogi used to attend all my talks, afterwards he'd pat me on the rear end and say, "Kid, let's go in and let's eat something." One day Yogi is sitting with me and he's looking at me and he says, "I know you want it." I said, "What do I want?" "No, I know you want it." I said, "What?" "A Yogiism." I said, "No, we're eating lunch. If it comes out, it comes out." He said, no, I have to give you one." So he's thinking. He says, "If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying." A quick personal story about Yogi. Yogi was a good guy. He was a really good guy. And my daughter had the flu or something. The next day I get a call. It's Yogi's secretary. Yogi Berra's on the phone. "Hello, how's your daughter doing?" "She's better today." "Bye, see you soon." That was it. But he called me to ask me how my daughter was doing the next day. So Yogi was he was a mensch. He was a real mensch. Anyway, television was pumping money into Major League Baseball, with monies growing from $2.3 million in 1950 to some $12 million in 1960. Now, Major League owners thought sinking attendance in the 1950s was caused by television exposure. But soon they were getting more money from TV than they were from ticket revenue, and TV starts calling all the shots in sports. As the 16 Major League Baseball teams began to televise games both regionally and nationally in the 1950s, minor league baseball suffered a swift and startling decline. As did, anybody see the movie League of Their Own?
Yes.
Okay, the League of Their Own. That league lasted until about 1954. And what ultimately killed that league was Milton Berle and Lucille Ball. People went home to watch
Yeah.
TV.
That's
People
right.
went home. And that's what killed minor league baseball as well. There were 59 minor leagues in 1949. 40 million people attended minor league games. 13 years later, the minor leagues were down to 19 leagues and attendance fell by 50%. 1950, the University of Pennsylvania gets $150,000 from ABC for home games. Dumont gives Notre Dame $185,000 for home games. Notre Dame has its own deal with NBC. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Sports officials thought TV is going to ruin sports. Nobody would go to games because they can watch it at home, which reminds me of Yogi, who once said about the restaurant, nobody goes there because it's too crowded. Stan Musial's restaurant in St. Louis. December 23rd, 1951, Dumont televised the first ever coast-to-coast professional football game, the NFL championship game between the Rams of LA and the Cleveland Browns. Dumont paid $75,000 for the rights to broadcast the game, and I hope they cashed that check real fast because Dumont had no money. Dumont in sports. Dumont was the sports pioneer. In 1952, all the New York Giants roads games were available in New York on Channel 5, and then in 1953, more national TV. During the 1953-54 seasons, Dumont broadcast Saturday night NFL games. Excuse me while I go into an imitation here of a guy named Howard Cosell. Ever hear from him? Yeah, he, for some reason, he adopted me, and I'm still friends with his grandkids, Justin and Justin, Colin, and Jared. Jared's an ESPN lawyer. Colin is the PA announcer for the Mets, and Justin is a principal of a charter school. Let me do Howard here. Roone Arledge, get over here. Howard wants to talk to you. Roone was Howard's rabbi at ABC. Howard could do whatever he wanted within reason, and if he went beyond reason, Roone would be the guy who would patch everything up. Roone Pincus Arledge. Anyway, Roone Arledge cut his teeth. He is the father of Monday Night Football. He cut his teeth with Saturday night NFL games. It was live, it was coast to coast, it was in black and white for the entire year. 1953, the first Thanksgiving game was televised nationally between the Lions and the Green Bay Packers. But by 1955, Dumont was crumbling. Its last show would be September 23rd, 1955. NBC gets Dumont, or rather NBC replaces Dumont for the NFL championship game, and they would pay $100,000. And the small network, ABC, which didn't really have many stations, and they didn't have many stations and didn't become profitable until they added one afternoon show. You know what that show was?
American Bandstand.
No, the Mickey Mouse Club. And then American Bandstand. Those two shows made them profitable, but it was the Mickey Mouse Club that did the first. The National Football League was at the right place at the right time. There is no better game on TV than football. You can see everything develop. You see the quarterback, you see the line of scrimmage, you see the quarterback handing off the ball or passing the ball, you see the receiver catching it, you see the linebacker making the hit. It's all there. You don't miss anything. It's an easy game to watch, and it did not hurt that the New York Giants won the NFL championship in 1956. I may remember that one. Giants had no offense. Defense, defense, defense. And my old pal, Sam Huff, he was the guy. Defense, defense, defense.
Wasn't that Frank Gifford's first year, though?
Gifford was there a couple of years earlier. Do you know Gifford was not liked by his teammates because he was too Hollywood? Gifford was there, I think, in '52.
Well, he went to the California school. So
Yeah, he went to USC. Yeah, USC, and he failed his screen test. How many of you remember Artie Donovan?
He was a big defensive lineman.
He was a
for
big
Baltimore.
defensive lineman who's
For
best,
Baltimore,
who hung out at Goldberg's Candy Store all the time on the Grand Concourse, and he was a Shabbos guy as well, and he was a friend of mine, and he played for the Baltimore Colts. The greatest game of all time. Well, there were circumstances why that was the greatest game of all time, and Artie told me it was the worst game the Baltimore Colts played all season. Anyway, Johnny Unitas, the Baltimore Colts. The game started the lasting love affair between Americans and football. After all, there are no women here because women of a certain age still swoon over this guy. And I had one woman, I was doing 1956 talk or something, and this was up in Fairfield County, Connecticut. And I put a picture up, and she said, "He was a bad boy." I said, "What?" "He was a bad boy." I said, "How'd you know?" "Well, the Giants trained at Fairfield University," and she was a student at Fairfield University, and she started talking, and I said, "I'm not sure you want to tell me all of this before everybody else." She said, "Why not? We went out." I said, "And yeah?" And she said, "I better not say anything else." Frank Gifford. The Giants, they were the darlings of Madison Avenue. Handsome Frank Gifford. And football gained acceptance. By the 1960s, the CBS show 20th Century, hosted by Old Iron Pants himself, Walter Cronkite, and that's the way it is, caught the football bug. Now let me get back to Artie Donovan for a minute. Artie came from the Grand Concourse, and Artie talked like Curly Howard. And he could have been the Three Stooges, he could have been one of the Three Stooges, except he was too big.
And he acted like Curly Howard, and he said it was the worst game we ever played. And then I went back on the Grand Concourse and saw all my old friends, and none of them would talk to me. I said, why? Because the Colts beat their Giants. I went to Goldberg's candy store. Mr. Goldberg wouldn't talk to me. I said, why? Because they beat the Giants. But 1978, they had a recreation of that game, CBS, in Central Park. And it was a flag football game. And Johnny Unitas's wide receivers were Avi and Dovey Goldberg. That was his wide receivers. Artie brought them down. They put on Colts jerseys, and Johnny Unitas was throwing to the Goldberg brothers. Think of that. Think of that. Anyway, my old buddy Sam Huff. Sam Huff was the first NFL player ever on the cover of Time magazine. Sam was a good guy. I mean, I had a friendship with him for over 25 years. How many of you remember The Violent World of Sam Huff? And if you want to go see it, it's up on YouTube. And it's part of Walter Cronkite's special. The Violent World of Sam Huff. Huff, the Giants' middle linebacker, was profiled in Mike during a preseason game to give the viewers an inside look at an NFL game. And Sam told me the game was in Montreal. And it was the Pittsburgh Steelers playing the New York Giants. And he said that the Steelers all knew that he was mic'd up and that they were filming him. And he said these guys would come over and give him an extra shot. And he'd say, what are you doing that for? He said, I want to be on TV. Sam Huff, The Violent World of Sam Huff. CBS, money is now being exchanged. Big money is now being exchanged. CBS paid the owners of the Chicago Cardinals football team $500,000 to move the team out of Chicago to St. Louis so they could show Chicago Bears games in the market. The Chicago Cardinals did play games in Minneapolis and in Buffalo, so CBS could have some TV presence during the season. But if one of those teams was home, you couldn't show the road game. So CBS wanted the money, and they gave the Bidwells, the owners of the franchise, $500,000. Have fun in St. Louis, and you know what? Use it to buy seats. But they had seats there, so they just pocketed the $500,000. Neither the Bears nor the Cardinals were seen much on local Chicago TV because of the blackout rule, and the only time Chicago games were on TV when the Bears and Cardinals were on the road. The franchise, the Cardinals, only played 4 games a year during the final years at home. 2 home games would be farmed out to Minneapolis and Buffalo to open up the Chicago market for NFL games. So you can see Bill Paley over at CBS decides, hey, we need to get them out of Chicago. We're losing money. TV, Arnold Palmer and Dwight Eisenhower. How many of you are golfers? How many of you watch the tournaments on TV? Okay. Well, it's the guy on the left that revolutionized television. And also his agent, Mark McCormick, he was also the agent for the Pontiff. He was the Pope's agent in the United States, Mark McCormick, who learned a lot from Yogi Berra and Frank Scott. Frank Scott was Yogi's guy, and he went to school on Frank Scott to make guys like Arnold Palmer popular. 1953, the first golf tournament was broadcast nationally. It was called the World Championship of Golf. It was played outside of Chicago, and on the weekends it was on for an hour a day on ABC. Ice-T, anybody? You know, most people don't know him as a golfer. They know him as an Ice-T now. How many of you have Arnold Palmer Ice-T? There you go. Deacon Palmer was a professional at the 9-hole Latrobe CC, and the Palmer family lived on the golf course. Arnold dreamed of playing golf for a living, and his victory at the U.S. Amateur in 1954 served as his launching pad. Ayatollah. This is the guy that made golf on TV popular. Pat Summerall called him the Ayatollah. Why don't you ask the Ayatollah? His name is Frank Charkanian. Now, Charkanian, how many of you like to listen to the sounds of golf on TV? The putt going in. Yeah? You like that? Well, thank him. Charkanian introduced high-angle cameras in new angles, put roving reporters on the ground, and made sure to capture the unique blends of sounds. The club hitting the ball falling into the cup, that came to define modern golf coverage. He even changed the way the scores were delivered, according to par rather than total. And then there was Arnie's Army. He was a Coast Guard guy, and it's the Masters where Arnie becomes a national celebrity. Palmer's relationship with the Augusta National and the television screen pushed him into the stratosphere of American celebrity. Frank Charkanian produced 38 consecutive Masters broadcasts from 1958 through 1996, and he knew the focus of the Masters had to be on Arnie. He absolutely fired up the screen. Do you agree with that, who watched golf? That he was must-see TV.
He was a likable guy also.
He was a likable, he was a quiet guy. I tried to interview him a couple of times.
Latrobe, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Latrobe. He really, he was a quiet guy. Didn't say very much. You couldn't get too much out of him. 1960, only 4 Americans made the field at the British Open after the mandatory qualifying, and only 2 of them made the cut. Arnold Palmer, who already won the Masters and the US Open that year, was attempting to match Ben Hogan's 3 for 3 for the 1953 season. Palmer lost by a stroke, but he showed up. And because he showed up, all of a sudden Americans are showing up in Scotland for that tournament. And it captures the eye of, Rowan Arledge, get over here. I need to speak to you. With Palmer going to the Open, along with other Americans and others from various parts of the world, Rowan Arledge, who's now at ABC, decided to televise the tournament in 1962. But he didn't really pay for the tournament. It was all part of Jim McKay, Jim McManus, Jim McManus was a really nice guy and was brilliant during the 1972 Munich massacre. Absolutely brilliant holding that telecast together. And by the way, they called him from the swimming pool. You only saw him with his jacket and shirt on. Underneath was his swim trunks and his flip-flops. But you didn't need to see that. The wide world of sports, the agony of defeat, and the thrill of victory. And there's Rowan. ABC, or the American Broadcasting Company, was a struggling TV network with very little direction in 1960. He was brought in to right the ship. He brought the global sports into American households with the wide world of sports, the Olympics, and the Open. Now, John F. Kennedy, what did he do in sports?
Play golf.
Well, played touch football.
Yeah.
He changed the NFL. He absolutely changed the NFL. John Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. He actually left 2 permanent impressions on the sports world, but for this talk, we'll just leave it at this. And the other one was he helped desegregate the Washington football team because they were playing in a federally built stadium, and he sent his Secretary of the Interior out, Stuart Udell, to tell George Preston Marshall, who was a very proud racist, desegregate or you get thrown out of the stadium. And he traded Ernie Davis, late Ernie Davis, to Cleveland for Bobby Mitchell, desegregating the team because he wanted a lease for 30 years in a stadium making him money. That was one of them. But this one, nationally, is more important. He created a massive revenue stream for sports owners by signing the Sports Television Broadcast Act of 1961, September 30th, 1961. He's not responsible for the legislation. A Brooklyn, New York congressman by the name of Emanuel Seller, anybody hear of Manny Seller? He wrote the bill. Gets no credit for changing the sports landscape in the United States. The Seller bill allowed the National Football League to market its broadcast rights as a league package, evenly spreading the broadcasting revenues among the franchises and guaranteeing each team substantial annual revenues. And there's Emanuel Seller. And that would apply to the NBA, also the NHL. Baseball had an antitrust exemption, so it was no big deal. And eventually Major League Soccer, college football, and others sell your package or sell your product as one to TV networks. By the way, before I get into Broadway Joe, by the way, I was talking to Roselle. Now, you're going back. Roselle's been gone since 1987. I was talking to him one day. I said, what was the most difficult thing to do to get the owners to agree to give up their big TV networks in New York, Chicago, Washington? And he said, it was hard, but we told them, you want a league? Green Bay had no TV. And Green Bay was putting together a good team in those days, 1960. He said, we could have a league with the Giants, and we could have a league with Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Green Bay at the bottom. And he was able to convince Tim Merritt in New York and George Hallis, not Art Rooney, and Daniel Reeves in LA to do this for the benefit of the league, and something called League Think. Two words combined as one became basically the credo of the NFL, League Think. So here's me. This is 1988. That's my friend Bruce Morton, who's in Denver now, and Broadway Joe. David Sarnoff gave the American Football League owners a huge multi-million-dollar contract in 1964 after failing to get the National Football League rights. Big rivalry between Paley and Sarnoff, not only for football, but for other things. Sarnoff was still upset because Paley stole Jack Benny from him in 1949. So this rivalry goes back a while. AFL owners, with that money, went out and signed college players beginning in 1965 to large deals. The way that deal came down was simple. Sonny Werblin. Sonny, as in Money Werblin. David Sonny, as in Money Werblin, who I ended up, my wife used to sing national anthems at Madison Square Garden. And Cosell recommended my wife to Sonny Werblin. And I talked to him about that one day. I said, how'd that come about? He said, well, I heard your wife warble a little bit. Warble. And she sung national anthems at Madison Square Garden when he was running it. Anyway, Sonny Werblin knew Sarnoff. And Sonny Werblin was a publicity agent for Johnny Carson, also for Elizabeth Taylor. And he convinced the old football guys in the American Football League, we have entertainment here. This is entertainment. You think it's sports, it's entertainment. We're going to sell it as entertainment. So Sarnoff is all upset. Paley gets the NFL, he calls Werblin, and he says, how much did they get? $35 million. Well, here's $35 million in $1. Go out there and build yourself a league. And that is how Joe Namath ended up with the Jets. Cable TV. ESPN more than likely would have failed without government intervention. Like a lot of other cable networks in the 1970s and 80s, it lost a lot of money. That's Prism in Philadelphia. Prism was a regional network like MSG in New York, and you had to pay big money, $10 a month for that. On December 5th, 1978, the Philadelphia Phillies made Pete Rose baseball's highest paid player when they signed him to a 4-year contract worth $800,000 a season. Where did the money come from? Prism. Prism. The hope was to get more subscribers with Rose with the Phillies. He's with the Phillies. Maybe somebody will spend $120 a year to watch not only the Phillies, but Philadelphia Flyers games along with Philadelphia 76ers games. The Gipper, guy I interviewed back in 1980. He's the guy who enhances sports with his signature. The United States Congress would pass the Cable TV Act of 1984, and Reagan would sign that bill. The legislation would create a basic extended tier that subscribers would have to do the old Frank Sinatra song, All or Nothing at All. You would have to pay for it as a whole and pay for every channel on it, whether you wanted that channel or not. So if you wanted, say, I don't know, what was on back in the, well, it's not much back on those days, but say you wanted CNN or TBS.
MTV.
when the MTV, yeah, they started in 1981. They're going out of business in Europe, MTV now, as of December 1st. But anyway, so you wanted those, you had to buy everything. You wanted sports, well, you had to take your MTV. The law allowed cable operators to bundle what were financially faltering networks into a basic expanded tier, which may have saved the cable industry, certainly saved CNN. They were losing $10 million a month, as consumers were paying one flat price for numerous stations on basic expanded. The bundling of channels would lead to the formation of regional cable sports networks and the Yankees' $550 million contract to save Madison Square Garden Network in 1989 around the United States strengthened ESPN, CNN, other Turner Sports and movie properties, and other cable networks. Regional sports networks would soon be able to pay more money for events than local over-the-air channels. The sports channels had two sources of income: subscriber fee and advertising support. Remember the early days of cable TV, no commercials? That didn't last long. The real game changer. We got Booze here. I actually liked him to hang around with. The guy was actually funny. I wouldn't want to work with him. Wouldn't want to work with him at all. But he once called Jerry Reinsdorf and Eddie Einhorn, the Chicago White Sox owners, the Abbott and Costello of baseball. He made Phil Rizzuto call horse racing. And you want to hear a quick story? Okay, Rizzuto. How many of you knew who Phil Rizzuto was? Okay, Rizzuto. Well, George decided, down in the local racetrack in Tampa, there's a local race show every week. We're going to have Rizzuto call the racing. He knew nothing about racing, absolutely nothing. And he says about one of them, hey, the colors on that horse are pretty. He's talking about the colors of the horse and all. But he made Phil do horse racing. Phil could barely do baseball. Anyway, the real game changer was in 1988. George Steinbrenner had a property, the Mona Lisa of baseball, as he called it, the New York Yankees, the TV rights. Madison Square Garden Network had no summer programming, and the two sides worked out a deal whereby Steinbrenner got about $500 million for selling Yankee rights to MSG and leaving Chuck Dolan's sports channel, which lost the rights. Magic and Bird, and that was Leroy Neiman, who I knew as well, had the mustache that went from here to there. The Bird, Magic, Johnson, Michael Jordan are considered the trilogy and the three most marketable NBA players, but they were not alone. The NBA had Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, and the Detroit Bad Boys. General Electric took notice of the NBA and its sudden popularity and signed a 4-year, $600 million contract on November 9th, 1989 to broadcast its games on NBC starting in 1990. It was the biggest TV deal to date and rather remarkable considering that a decade earlier, CBS was showing NBA playoff games on tape delay. Larry Tisch owns CBS. And he ruins the CBS News division, absolutely guts it. Why? Because he doesn't see any value in news. He sees value in entertainment. And what's entertainment? National Football League games, Major League Baseball games. But the NFL was not very loyal to Larry Tisch, or loyal to anybody. NFL went looking for money in 1993 and divorced NBC. Rupert Murdoch didn't stiff anybody in sports because Murdoch the NFL put Murdoch on the map in 1993. The acquisition of the rights to NFL games in '93 bolstered his struggling Fox over-the-air television syndication arm. What were the two most popular shows on Fox? Married with Children and The Simpsons. And they had other shows as well. They had Gary Shandling and a few others, Tracy Ullman, but they're going nowhere. They're going absolutely nowhere. So this is a television syndication arm, and all of a sudden he gets powerful TV stations in markets like Milwaukee and Detroit,
They dropped the CBS programming. They don't have the NFL anymore. And David Stern one day said, and this is about 30 years ago, over 30 years ago, and he tells me, he said, one day you're going to be watching games from a phone. I said, get out of here. I said, get out of here. He said, no, you're going to be watching games from a phone. How many of you use your phone to watch video today? Okay. David said, it's about 1993, 94, we're sitting there and talking, and until he said I created a monster, and he started snapping at me. Before that, I was this 37-year-old guy just listening to his wisdom and his need. David Stern was a very smart man, extraordinarily smart man, the son of a delicatessen owner in Manhattan. Extraordinarily smart man, lived over in Scarsdale. He envisioned people watching basketball games on a computer in the 1990s. He was right. About 2007, 2008, I went up to him, I said, David, you know what? You were right. He said, coming from you, an apology? I said, don't go that carried away with it. He was a smart ass too, but he was very bright. David Cavill, the former vice president of the Oakland Athletics. At the end of the line for radio, how many still listen to baseball on the radio? That's it?
Yankee games.
That's
In
it?
your car. When you're
In your car, that's it. John Sterling was a nice guy. Dave Sims is a nice guy. Anyway, terrestrial radio is kind of dying. This is Cavill a couple of years ago. And we need to look long-term at how you get in front of people with audio. There's still going to be an audio feed of the game, the way there is with traditional radio. But there are going to be many ways people can consume that, and we want to provide options to achieve that in multiple ways. Radio is dead. I mean, it is. How many of you actually listen to the radio if you're not in the car? This room is dead silent. Dead silence in the room. Dead silence. So I have 6 transistor radios in the house. The reason why, if there's a hurricane, snowstorm, knock out electricity, you can rely on your radio to get information. You can't rely on your computer and phone to get your information. But radio in the 1920s. Cavill's Oakland Athletics franchise did not plan to put games on Bay Area radio stations in 2020. Eventually found a local outlet. Many NBA teams and NHL teams offer audio play-by-play on streaming services. The New Jersey Devils, you have to listen to them on your phone. The best way to listen to the New York Islanders is on your phone. St. Louis Blues, same thing. Local radio is not paying for radio broadcasts. They're revenue sharing these days. And teams think that streaming services are more important than radio. The cord cutting. How many of you cut your cord? Cable TV cord. How many of you have cut your cord? Okay, you've cut it. 2023, baseball came in like a lion for some Major League Baseball. Or February came in like a lion for some Major League Baseball, National Football, Basketball Association, and National Hockey League teams. The Sinclair-owned Diamond Sports Group, which had 19 regional sports networks around the United States, missed a $140 million debt payment in mid-February, had to make a payment by mid-March or file for Chapter 11. They did, and teams broke their contracts, signed contracts with them just to have some cable presence for literally a dime on the dollar. Warner Brothers Discovery owned 3 regional sports networks, AT&T Sports Network in Colorado, Utah, Houston, and Pittsburgh. They got out of the business. The cable TV mode was broken. Paid for sports. Sports fills up TV time. Gets the prize demo that advertisers want. 18 to 34-year-old men. The 2025 Super Bowl. That went to Fox. Fox will get the highest rated TV show, or got the highest rated TV show, in a leg up on the TV industry's all-important February sweeps month. Local stations' advertising rates are based on how many viewers watch that station's programming during the sweeps, and the Fox affiliates got the big boost. Jeff Bezos, He is redefining sports coverage. How many of you have Amazon Prime, the streaming service? Okay, how many of you have the NFL package or the NBA package? The streaming services are going to cost you a ton of money. A ton of money. They're Peacock, they're Amazon Prime, they are also Netflix. And you got to subscribe to all of that to get sports events. And it's going to cost you more and more money. Amazon renewed its Thursday night NFL streaming rights package for $130 million for 2018-2019. Google's first venture into a live sporting event took place in March 2018 with a Major League Soccer match. The LAFC ownership signed a deal with Google, which gave YouTube exclusive rights to LAFC contests. Other media, YouTube signed a deal with Major League Baseball, the presenting sponsor, 2017 World Series. Amazon and Twitter had NFL deals. Facebook is streaming sports properties. The sporting world is changing. Apple had a deal for baseball. Apple has all Major League Soccer games. Streaming services want sports. Gee, it's going back to the future. Remember David Sarnoff? It's not any different. It gets young eyeballs. Eyeballs used to an iPhone, computers, and emerging technology. Amazon Prime, Thursday Night Football, that became the NFL's exclusive Thursday night home in 2022. Apple has a deal with Major League Soccer, goes through 2032. Apple's had deals with Major League Soccer and Major League Baseball. That is the future. Netflix this year is going to have the NFL Christmas games, 2 of them. You want to pay a whole year of Netflix for 2 games? That's what you got to do. That's what you got to do if you want it. It's
Yankee
becoming,
baseball,
what?
Wednesday, every Wednesday, Yankee baseball is on
Yep.
Prime.
Yep, it's changed. It's going to cost you more and more money. Why? Because the owners want more money. And Netflix, 2 Christmas games last year. Amazon's newest partner is, the NBA's newest partner is Amazon, replacing Warner Brothers Discovery. And Warner Brothers Discovery is run by David Zaslav, who went to Ramapo High School and graduated there in 1978. The times, they are changing. Questions and comments?
The role of the Major League Baseball owners,
Yeah,
are they business people or sports enthusiasts or both?
they're business people first. They are business people first. Hal Steinbrother. Hal Steinbrother's his father was a lunatic, and he would overpay for Dave Collins and people like that. They run the Yankees like a business now. Steve Cohen's 5 years with the Mets. Any Mets fans here? Condolences to you too. His 5-year tax write-off is done. That's why he's going to claw back on spending money. He can't write it off as much as he could. They're business people. They look at, why are American billionaires buying into the English Premiership? They see an undervalued product.
That's right.
Total undervalued product. And they feel that they can buy it cheap and sell big. Yeah.
You don't talk about college sports, how it affects.
That's evolving. That is evolving. I did talk about Notre Dame. They have their own contract. But you know, the other sports, they all share in with the Big Ten Network and all. You know, we are looking at private equity going into college sports. Private equity buying into sports programs. Think of that. Think of that. But that's another talk for another day. That's another talk.
I know this is going to open up a big package here, so just give me a short answer.
Yeah.
What do you feel about the whole gambling industry, especially teams actually buying gambling companies to set up betting parlors?
You mean like
in
Shea
their-
Stadium, what Cohen is going to do?
I mean, if a team is taking basketball by 14 points, and they're up by 12, a guy can just throw it into the stands.
Well, they wouldn't do that.
they would come up short.
Oh, okay. come up-
CCNY, 1950-51.
Okay, so,
You know, just, you know, kind of shake, you know, you throw the free throw up and it kind of rings the basket. How are they gonna prove it?
it's gonna make the Black Sox fans seem
Yeah.
like nothing.
Well, the NCAA right now, as we speak, is discussing allowing college athletes, college coaches, college administrators, sports administrators, they're allowing them to, on November 1st, they may announce that they're gonna allow them to bet on sports. That's a whole talk
Yeah.
that I give, and, you know, it goes, but you know, Bosch Tweed ran the New York baseball team back in the 1870, 71, somewhere around there. Bosch Tweed. Is there anybody more corrupt than Bosch Tweed? But he ran the baseball team. I give a talk on that, and all of that, and how the NFL for years and years and years and years was against sports gambling. As soon as it's legalized, hey, look at all the deals that we have. The Arizona Cardinals have a betting parlor inside the stadium. Inside the stadium. And that's part and parcel of the, now let's do a stadium village. We'll keep all the money, they'll set up, I might be here for the next 5 hours explaining this, but sports gambling is part and parcel to all of this. There's a FanDuel network. This inning is sponsored by FanDuel and all that, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. Anybody else? It's your turn, Barbara.
All right. Thank you very much, Evan.
I need the 2 Spring Valley alum. I want to take a picture with them.